Morning, Trainiacs. We have a special project in mind today. The world is going to tubeless tires. That means taking the inner tube from inside of a tire. Now, you can't do this with all tires, but taking it out and sealing the rim so that you don't even need the tube in there. Now, why you do this is very well illustrated by these fat bike tires. The two tubes inside these fat bike tires amount to a total of 4 pounds. Now, because that 4 pounds is on the outside of a spinning wheel, that 4 pounds is actually more like about 16 pounds. It's multiplied by about 4 times depending on the speed that you're going. So taking weight out of the exterior of the wheel with tubeless tires, with disc brakes, and not having to have that big rim makes a huge difference on the performance of a bike. But instead of just giving this to the bike shop, I am going to try to do it myself, and we're gonna have a bit of a learning experience and come back to you with what I learned for an absolute beginner's guide to going to tubeless tires. All right, just 3 hours and 20 minutes later, and the tubes are gone. Allow me to go inside and I'll explain the process of doing this. Whoa! I wouldn't say that this is hard, but I also wouldn't say that it's easy. However, for the dollar for performance change, by far one of the best changes that you can make. Cost me maybe about $60 to take the tubes out of there. It's probably about a 12 to 15 pound rolling weight kind of difference. And think about if you lost 12 to 15 pounds, how much faster you could go. All right, let me explain. Okay, so the really nice thing about this changeover is that you don't really need any specialized tools. You don't need any specific tools. You might need some specialized, the brand tools. First thing you're going to need is a rim strip, and you can just get some Gorilla Tape or a little bit of duct tape from your local hardware store. Then you're gonna go and want to get some tire sealant. If you're up in cold weather, where I am, get the Bontrager tire sealant, whereas other tire sealants might not be so good when it starts freezing. You're also going to need some tubeless specific valve stems. And those are valve stems that have a gasket on the top inside end, what goes inside the rim, and then that gets sucked down onto the rim and creates that airtight seal. You also definitely need a pump of some sort. If you don't have tires that are meant to be run tubeless like these are, the tires might not be very tight on the rim, so it's gonna be hard to snap those tires into place, and you're going to want to get a compressor that can attach to your Presta valve so that you can just hit it really hard and instantly fill up that tire and snap the bead into place. You can test this by just taking off one of the tires, and if it's extremely tight like these, you know that it is probably going to be okay for a floor pump. If it's fairly loose and you can snap those tires on and off fairly easily, you're going to want the compressor. So step one, you've got to take the tire off and get that tube out of the wheel. However you need to do it, just get it out, start working your way around using tire levers, not using anything sharp and not using anything metal, because you might puncture the tire, the tube, you might scratch the rim. So stay with just regular tire levers, no matter how tight it is. That is what turned this into a 3-hour job. Next thing you want to do is clean the rim, and you do this with a rubbing alcohol. Just put a little bit on a cloth and clean the inside of the rim all the way around. While you're at it, if you've got disc brakes, take that rubbing alcohol cloth and clean off the disc brakes while you've got the tire out, and you can easily access them. This will stop a little bit of the squeaking that happens from disc brakes and just make them run a little bit smoother. Once that rubbing alcohol is dry, then take the duct tape or Gorilla Tape, whatever you're using, and run 2 beads on the inside of the rim. And you take 1 bead and run it up close to one edge, making sure to cover any of the holes that are running down the middle of the rim. The other strip of tape, make sure you're covering an overlap in the middle and go all the way around. Once you've done this, really press down that rim strip very tightly, especially in the middle and the edges, because this is where air might seep out. So go around maybe a couple of times, pressing down over and over, getting that tacked on there really tightly and working out any air bubbles. After you've done that, locate the hole for the valve stem, take that specific valve stem for the tubeless setup and puncture a hole with a pen or a punch, something sharp, and then put that valve stem through the rim and make sure that you tighten up the nut on the other side. Whereas with tubed tires, you can actually just leave that nut on the other side completely off. In this case, we need that on there and we need it fairly tight, even more than hand tight. Take a pair of pliers and turn it a few extra times so that you get that gasket of the valve stem sucked right down to inside the rim. Then take the tire, put it back on the rim, trying to snap it as close to the bead on both sides as you can. We want to get the edge of the tire close to the edge of the rim so it'll snap into place really easily. This is where you might need a compressor. First thing you can try is just a floor pump, and if it's accepting air and not leaking out air too quickly, use that floor pump to pump up the tire up to the maximum pressure that the tire and the rim allow. Don't go over that or you might be losing an eye. That's going to allow that tire to snap into place. All that pressure of the air is going to snap the tire into the bead. If the tire isn't that tight, you're probably going to need a compressor, in which case you put the compressor to the maximum PSI that is allowable by the tire and the rim, pump it up really instantly, and that should then snap it into place. At this point, what you do is you go to the valve stem and you take off that valve stem core. That's the very end. And you can do this with a pair of needle nose pliers. And you take off the very end, let all of the air out, and then you bring the tire sealant. A lot of these tire sealants have a very thick particulate in them, a lot of sediment that sits in the bottom, so you've got to shake it up a ton. Take however you are inserting this into the tire, whether it's a syringe or just a nozzle that attaches onto the edge of this. Get that all ready, then pour as much into the tire as is recommended on the tire sealant bottle. This says in the case of a 29-inch tire, these are 27.5. I'm looking for 51 milliliters. A 700C tire is 25 milliliters. So that gives you a range of tires depending on what you're using it for. Once you've poured all of that in, put that valve stem core back on, putting on a little bit of plumber's tape around the edge to get a nice tight bond in between that valve stem core and the valve stem. At this point, you're close to done. Then take the tire, pump it up to about 10-15 PSI. We just want to get a little bit of pressure in it. And then at that point, you have to start washing around all of the tire sealant. What we're looking to do is constantly be coating the sides, the bottom, the back, the outside of the tire, the inside of the rim, the area where the valve stem hits, all of the surface area of that rim strip tape that you put on. You want to get it sloshed around so that it covers absolutely everything and seals up all those potential cracks. So slosh that wheel all the way around before you can put it back on the bike, and then once you have both wheels on the bike, go for a ride. Repeat this every 2 to 3 hours. As it's drying, we don't want it to just dry in the bottom of one of the tires. We want it to constantly be washed around so that as it's thickening up and coating all different sides of your tire. Gotta do that right now. So now, even if you've done it right, you're probably gonna have a slow leak over the next couple of days. That's why you keep pumping up the tire, sloshing it around. Pumping up the tire, sloshing it around. It takes a while for this stuff to completely dry and get into all the cracks. If after a few days you still can't get it to hold tire pressure, you might have to do this again, in which case you call in the pros. I hope I don't have to call in the pros. So now let's go see just how much weight we pulled out of the bike. Scale says, 160. I've been eating all day. I am off-season weight. I'm wearing jeans and shirt. Don't think less of me. Now, let's get these in our hand. It's like 6 pounds we took out of the bike by taking out the tubes. Now, rule of thumb, after you get your bike to around 18 pounds, say with a road bike, it costs another $1,000 to $2,000 for every additional pound of savings. But in this case, we just spent $60 and spent 3 hours getting 6 pounds out of the bike, and it's rolling pounds around the edge of a wheel. So we're talking maybe a performance improvement of, I don't know, call it 12 to 20 pounds easily. That is probably going to be the single best investment that you'll make on the performance of a bike per dollar you spend. And the bigger the tires are as you start getting into mountain bikes, gravel bikes, cross bikes, fat bikes, the heavier these things are and the more difference it's going to make. So there you go, Trainiacs, we finish where we start. If you aren't already subscribed, hit that subscribe button below, and if you are subscribed, go and detube yourself. All right, I gotta go clean myself. I'm filthy now. Later, Trainiacs.